Well, thank you very much. And now the floor is open. Who would like to, Monsieur Laïchoubi? No, you are second, okay? No. Mohamed, you are first as an honorary member of the European Union. Tu es le premier parce que... Non, si. En tant que membre honoraire de l'Union européenne.
Merci beaucoup. J'ai écouté avec beaucoup d'attention une intervention extrêmement intéressante. J'ai pour ma part...
I was listening to this very interesting conversation, and I have a question based on two axes. First of all, I would like to know your opinion of the disillusion, the people's disillusion of the European system. Secondly, you noticed that there was a rupture between the political class and the popular class because you mentioned that the parliamentary majority was voted Remain. However, the popular opinion was different. So what is your opinion about this rupture between the popular or populist dynamic and the political class? My third question is perhaps a bit more general. Do you believe that there is a reconsideration of the political professionalization process and its ability to manage the new dynamics of opinion, in particular in the US and in Europe? Thank you very much.
Since you are so short of time, so si vous voulez, levez votre main.
Yes, is this working? Yes. Uri Dadouche from Washington, D.C. So, devil's advocate question, if I may, even though I'm a Europeanist. Are we making too big a deal of Brexit in the sense that you have a 15% devaluation of sterling, which is hugely larger than any potential MFN tariff, most favored nation tariff, that would be applied to the UK by the European Union. Basically the UK has become a lot more competitive than it was before. And even if you raise the tariff, it would still remain far more competitive. And the issue about regulations, which is the other volet, as they say, is that the regulations have to be harmonized. But to a large degree, that is up to the UK to harmonize or to keep the regulations that it wants to keep. So are we making too much of it?
Thank you, Yuri. And I can take one third question if there is. I don't see it. See, Monsieur Tabet. Lève ta main, lève ta main. On te voit.
Merci. Je voudrais vous poser une question sur les...
Thank you. I have a question about the consequences of Brexit to the London financial square. Will there be a movement of financial squares from London to other European capitals, such as Paris, perhaps, or Berlin, Frankfurt?
With the last first, because I think it's the easiest to answer. I think the one great gainer from Brexit will be New York. It seems to me that quite a lot of business will go back across the Atlantic. Business that came to London from the United States in the 70s and 80s. I think that will go back. I don't see huge gains for Paris or Frankfurt, to be honest. I think that there is the loss of the reduction in the size of the city, and I don't want to exaggerate this, a lot of it will remain and flourish, but there will be some reduction in size, and I think that is the loss of a major European asset. I don't think it will be easy to replace that in Frankfurt or Milan or Paris. That does worry me. I think that some business will certainly go. I think that the clearinghouses case will appear again, and I think it is not unreasonable that those who run the euro should want clearing of euro transactions to be in institutions regulated by the Eurozone. That seems to me to be not unreasonable and likely to happen. So I think this is, I don't see a sort of a cliff edge, I don't see a sudden shock, but I think the size of the city will probably reduce over time, and the biggest beneficiary will, in my view, be New York. As for are we making too much of it all? Devaluation. The British have a wonderful track record of devaluation. We devalue and we devalue and we devalue, and it never does us any good because our productivity record is lousy. I agree, this is a big devaluation this time. The effects will come through next year when inflation will rise from, at present it's about 1%, it'll go up to about 3.5. Prices will go up. I think that inward investment, for the same sort of reason that I think about the city, inward investment would likely to turn down. I don't think people will go away, but the new flow of investment will be down. I would expect prices in the shops to be up, partly as a result of devaluation, and I would expect this to make the Brexit story rather unpopular with the man in the street in about 18 months, 2 years' time. But as for regulation, yes, of course, regulation in the British market is precisely the same as it is in the European Union as a whole now. And the British have a better record than most actually implementing laws written in Brussels. But what are we talking about? The idea was to take back control. Can you see British ministers going down to Parliament every time there's a new law written in Brussels? British ministers going down and proposing an identical law or an identical change in regulation in order to retain the access which regulatory equivalence would require. I think that's quite difficult to see. I think it's on a static analysis there would be no difficulty, but over a dynamic analysis it seems to me it's likely to go wrong. I turn now to the first question, which really is a deeper question. It's about what caused all this. Why are we where we are? And I think the reasons are many. It is absolutely true that the educated voted to stay and the less well-educated voted to leave. It is perfectly true that the young voted to stay and the old voted to leave. The tipping point was age 34, which I think is exactly the same as the tipping point in the United States, so the presidential election. So I think you can see some resemblance there. I wouldn't want to exaggerate that. I don't think we've voted to leave because of the economy is stupid. I really don't think so. The Conservative government's handling of the economy was rather successful. The deficit is still too big, but the growth rate was quite good, and unemployment is at an 11-year low at the moment. So I think the idea that it was a protest about inequality or about economic decline doesn't really work. I think it was partly about immigration. I think it was partly about David Cameron. And there I think there is a resemblance to the referendum that defeated Giscard d'Estaing's constitutional treaty and the re-election of President Chirac in 2002. David Cameron was voted back in 2015 as Prime Minister, which he did not expect to happen. But he was voted back because the Labour Party was seen by the country at large to have an unelectable leader. But in 2016, people chose to vote against Mr. Cameron, I think partly to show him that they didn't really like him. They had to vote for him, but they didn't really like him, which is, I think, what happened to Giscard d'Estaing's treaty with people who had been, with no left candidate in the second round, had been required to vote for Chirac, showing their disagreement. I may be wrong about that, but I think it wasn't any demerit in my beautiful treaty. I think it was more French politics and the Polish plumber. I think that Cameron had got himself into a tactical fix. He did not expect to have to carry out this referendum when he promised it in 2013. He expected that either he would not be back in power or he would be again in coalition with the Liberal Democrat Party, who would prevent him from having a referendum. He, in his years in number 10, he never made a single speech in favor of the European Union. He was always critical of it. He liked to cast himself as the heroic defender of an isolated Britain being coming under continual attack in Brussels, which is sometimes the case, but not always the case. He distanced the UK quite a bit from Europe. He refused to join in any bailouts. He refused to accept any refugees who had reached Italy or Greece. These were a mistake. His negotiation in the early months of the year was a very minor negotiation, not the talk of reform of Europe as a whole, which he'd originally presented, but further UK-specific changes that he sought, some of which he achieved, but they cut no ice in the country at large. I think I am arguing, I think, that the referendum result was more accidental than existential. Unfortunately, its consequences go very deep. And I think a further cause that I should mention is that there definitely was a resemblance to the United States in that there was a curious nativist, anti-globalization, nostalgic tinge to the Leave campaign. They were looking for a Britain that existed at some mythical time in the past. And I think there's quite a lot of that behind the vote for Trump in states like Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. So I think there are some resemblances. I don't think that the elite, the Oxford and Cambridge, London, where there is a strong majority in favor of remaining, I don't think that the elite really feels that it can resist what the referendum result. I think it feels that it, and I think Mrs. May is correct in this, that it really has to act on the result and start the process. Some, like me, believe that as the economic consequences become clear, and as it becomes clear that the leavers disagree amongst themselves and told the country a number of things that were not true. As that becomes clear, it may be possible to revisit this at some future date. But I go back to what I said before. The central assumption everybody should make is that, sadly, Britain will leave the European Union.
Thank you very much. Normally we should stop here, but I can take one or two more questions and then we wind up. So and just in the back, yes, first, and then Philippe. Okay, second. Wait, you have the floor. Well, you have you even have the micro.
Yes, thank you. I'm Ludishki from Morocco. First of all, I would like to thank the panelist for his insight. And even if he used the word divorce, which gives the impression that something is irreversible or definitive, I would like to him to tell us what is the likelihood of a reverse of this process of Brexit? I think that the last elections in the United States proved that the unexpected can be possible. So in case of change of heart, we might consider also that the unpredictable could happen before the 10 years that you referred to. Thank you.
Thank you. So I will ask, because, so Philippe, very short, please, and Masoud, then very short, and then John will answer, yeah.
Philippe Chalmin, very quickly, don't you think that if the Remain had won, the negotiation of the Brussels Agreement of February would have been a nightmare for Europe?
Masoud?
Question for you. If I understand correctly your timetable, the time by which disillusionment could set in is a few years down the road, because that's when the trade post-Brexit deal will become clearer, and that's when the economic consequences will be clearer. But the decision on leaving has to be made within 2 years of the initiation of Article 50. So you will have to decide to leave before the full costs of leaving are clear. Is there a way in your mind where you could square the circle on the timetable so that when people make the decision, they know what they are deciding?
So if you can answer all that in 2 minutes.
2
And
minutes.
because it is you, 2 minutes and a half.
Yes, it is legally reversible. I believe that a British change of mind would be accepted by our partners. The question is how to create the political situation in Britain which makes the British government of the day decide to withdraw the notification. Yes, I agree that the sequence is hard to see, though I believe the economic consequences, at least the uncertainty and the economic effects of uncertainty, will become clear within 2 years. I actually didn't at all like the negotiation that the British conducted up to February of this year. I thought that we were arguing for completely the wrong things. That negotiation is completely dead. As soon as the referendum result came through, the 27 agreed that they would not proceed with any of the concessions that had been made to Mr. Cameron. Correctly, in my view. I think it would have been difficult. I feel a huge opportunity was missed. Mr. Cameron made a speech at Bloomberg's in 2013 which called for the completion of the single market, action on the digital single market, a increase in democratic accountability. It was rather a good speech, and it was quite widely supported in large parts of the EU. But unfortunately, we never put forward any concrete proposals. And when it came to a negotiation, we were not arguing for reforms for all Europe. We were arguing for further singularizing the United Kingdom in ways which it was a strange negotiation. He argued, give me this or I shall lose my referendum. He was given part of it and he lost his referendum. He now says if he'd been given more, he mightn't have lost his referendum. This is silly. We need to make up our minds as a country what it is we want to do. And I think it is not at all surprising that the Eurozone didn't feel it could give him all he was asking for, or that Eastern Europe felt it could give him all he was asking for on free movement of persons. So it seems to me that was an unfortunate negotiation. I think it was also very silly to try to present that in Britain, as the government did, as changing everything and reforming the European Union, because plainly it did not. And actually, as a tactic, it worked very badly, because the Leave campaign were able to criticize it as not living up to what he had promised he would do. And I think it damaged the government. I do think it was a series of accidents like that that led to this. I always annoy political scientists by saying that it's very easy after the event to detect great trends and tides in the affairs of man. I think it's mistakes that usually do the trick. I remember arguing that John Major's great success in the Maastricht negotiation in 1991 was principally because Helmut Kohl liked him because he wasn't Margaret Thatcher, and François Mitterrand fell asleep at the crucial moment.
Well, you have finished?
I think I'd better stop.
Just for today. Well, let me thank you very much, John. I think you were neither pessimistic nor optimistic. I was going to say, of course, but I think you were very realistic, very precise, and I'm sure that many of us will have understood better actually the stakes in the next few months and probably years. So thank you very much. I hope that next year when we meet for the 10th WPC, we will have a clearer view. Thank you very much.